something's promising you something as a quick fix solution, 9 times out of 10, it's probably not going to be the one that's actually going to give you the benefits long term.
Welcome to the Be Well podcast, wellness backed by science, bringing you inspiring conversations to help you on your wellness journey to a healthier, happier you. Brought to you by Breast Cancer UK. You can start your personal prevention journey right now by taking our prevention quiz. Just click on the link in the show notes.
Hello and welcome to the Be Well podcast. I'm Thalie Martini, CEO of Breast Cancer UK. Now today I'm going to be talking to a nutritional therapist who specialises in gut health and the gut-brain connection, something that I'm very interested in hearing about. Now she's a passionate cook and she's also penned 2 books on gut health. Be Good to Your Gut, which has been named Vogue's Best New Healthy Cookbook, and also Happy Gut, Happy Mind, and this explores the far-reaching effects of good gut health, including its links to good cognitive function. Now, she's also co-host of the Wellness Breakdown podcast with Rosemary Ferguson, and the two explore and test the latest trends in women's health, and this is really, really fascinating, given how much information there is out there and just how confusing it can really be, especially for women. Now, good gut health and also a healthy microbiome is something that we at Breast Cancer UK have been paying a lot of attention to more and more, because there is growing research on the links between a healthy gut and breast cancer risk. But the other thing that's really interesting about my guest that I want to explore is that she also considers how our microbiome is impacted by lifestyle factors such as alcohol as well as weight. And we know that both of these can increase our breast cancer risk. So let's hear more about this fascinating topic from the expert herself. I'm delighted to welcome Eve Kalinik. Is that how we pronounce it?
It's Kalinik, but
Kalinik.
It's fine. I quite like that one. Kalinik. That's a new one for me.
I'm way too phonetic. Excuse me.
Love it.
Anyway,
I love it.
welcome to the podcast, Eve. I'll just refer to you with your first name so that I don't get trouble by your surname, but lovely surname. So thank you so much for joining us today. You're a really busy woman, and you also you wear lots of hats. You're a nutritional therapist, you're a writer, you create recipes, and all of that is underpinned by this passion and your specialism for gut health. And so really today is really going to be a lot of conversation around the gut. So firstly, what led you into this specific area of nutrition, and why do you think the gut microbiome has become such a big buzzword in recent years?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for having me here. It's such a pleasure. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk more about this with you. So I actually, kind of a bit of a cliche really, in the sense that I had some health issues. I actually worked in the fashion industry prior to retraining as a nutritional therapist, although ironically my first degree was in psychology, so I sort of feel I've come full circle with it. But I retrained as a nutritional therapist because I was having some health issues. I just wanted to understand more, and actually having the support and guidance from a nutritionist, I managed to actually get myself into a much better place with that. And so it felt really empowering, because it was actually things that I could do myself to help my body. And so I retrained, and and then off the back of that, the gut health kind of specialism, it's more like gut health found me rather than the other way around. I wish to say, I'd like to say that I was sort of this pioneer in it all, but actually it was part of my journey in, because I had a history of a lot of antibiotics when I was sick, and as we know, like antibiotics are kind of like a grenade to the gut anyway, and having recurrent bouts of them, and not at that point having the insight that we do now, in that you need to then rebuild the guts afterwards. I had a lot of like tummy issues, like IBS and things like that. So gut health kind of, I wanted to kind of like help myself in that way, and kind of did my research, and it kind of then became my specialism. And when I released the first book in 2017, it was in its nascency, really. Like, there wasn't much out there about gut health. I mean, not to the degree there is now. People were kind of looking at me a bit weirdly when I was talking about poo all the time. Yeah. But now it's like, I think, gut health has become such a big topic. And to answer your question about this it being a buzzword. I just think because now, year on year, we're finding more and more information out about the gut microbiome, and actually it's far-reaching influence, and it's not just about being a poop machine, and it's not just about digestion. Like, it influences pretty much every system in the body. So I think that's probably why the intrigue and the interest is kind of just snowballing, and people just want to know more and more about gut health. So I feel like it was a lucky sort of fate thing for me to kind of specialize in it. And yeah, and then the second book kind of came off the back of the first one, which was, I guess, I had a personal bereavement, and I realised how much stress impacted on my digestion. I guess because it was a lived experience of it, even though I'd obviously had experience of gut health issues myself. It was really kind of a marked difference when I went through that, and it kind of sparked my interest in like the gut-brain connection. And again, that's an area now that in the last even 5 years we're just getting more and more knowledge around. So I think it's a really dynamic area of science, and I think it's just going to continue to develop, and we're just going to find out more and more.
Yeah, so you really are at the vanguard of a scientific area that's taking off.
Yeah.
You've called the gut microbiome the foundation of our overall health. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I mean, this is going to sound so cheesy, but Hippocrates, who's deemed the father of modern medicine, he was like, all disease begins in the gut, and that was thousands of years BC. And so I think he was basically onto something there, in that the reason why I believe it to be the foundation of our health is because it influences so many systems in the body. So we mentioned the gut-brain axis for one. So there is a lot of research now around gut health links to cognitive conditions. So even things like Parkinson's, there's quite a lot of data around that, and the links between the microbiome and propensity for Parkinson's. So it's tenuous still around. We don't really know the link between the microbiome and mood, but there are correlations there. It certainly impacts on our immune system functioning. Most of our immune system is actually located and managed in our gut, which a lot of people don't know, like 70 to 80%. So immune system functioning, weight. So our gut microbiome manages some of these, actually now getting a lot of press, GLP-1 receptor sites and appetite hormones, things like how we manage inflammation in the body, even things like hormonal balancing. Like, our gut has a key role in helping to detoxify estrogens. There's a subset of microbes actually called the estrobolome that's their specific role. So you can see how many systems it is sort of implicated in and has such a key role. So that's kind of the reasoning for that.
And when it comes to breast cancer, a lot of the things you've named there are potentially risk factors for breast cancer. So anything that kind of has an estrogenic effect, let's say, could potentially increase breast cancer risk. And you also talked about, weight. And so we'll have a chat about that later, because that is also fascinating. But I'm interested in where you are at today. You do have a background in psychology, but you're also studying an MA in psychotherapy. So is that why you have more interest in this gut-brain connection?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess because I was... The second book, Happy Gut, Happy Mind, is really taking it from literally the bottom up. So it's looking at how does our gut health impact on our cognitive health, our brain health. And so in that book, and also through my own lived experience through actually going through the process of therapy, talking therapy, I realised that actually it is a bi-directional relationship. And so knowing that gut to brain relationship, I kind of wanted to just understand a bit more about the brain to gut one. And so that's kind of what led me on to the decision to do the masters. But also in my clinical experience, a lot of the clients that come to me for nutritional therapy, and we're dealing with the physical symptoms, actually have a lot of things that are going on emotionally and psychologically. And so my whole ethos around our health and well-being generally is one that's holistic. I think we can get caught up in like silver bullet things, and actually it's much more complex than that, but it doesn't need to be complicated. So, but it's just about being aware that it's not just one area of the body or one thing. Like you can't just nail your nutrition and not exercise, or be mindful about your sleep and similarly take care of what's going on emotionally. And I think sometimes that one can be kind of lost. So that was kind of the reasoning behind doing it. It was to kind of inform my nutritional practice with this psychotherapy undertone of like emotional support as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds complex, but then it also sounds intuitive. Like we are a whole body. We're not just parts that function independently. But what does the research actually tell us? The research today, what does it tell us about the links between the microbiome, our brain, as well as our mental health? Is there any kind of concrete research on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research around the links between the gut and the brain and how it's bidirectional. So, like our brain can influence our gut. So for example, if we're very stressed and we're producing a lot of cortisol in the system, which is our body's major stress hormone, that we know that can directly impact on the composition of the microbiome. So it shifts it into one that's not necessarily as favourable, and also can directly impact on the gut barrier itself. So yeah, there's a lot of research as to like how that connection works. In terms of the mood links, it's still there's still a lot that needs to be done. We do know that, for instance, the microbes in our gut produce the same neurotransmitters that we produce in our brain. So things like serotonin, dopamine, GABA. I think this is where people want to simplify it. Like, well, if you have and I guess the title of my book is a bit misleading, and Happy Gut, Happy Mind. It doesn't really quite work like that. Like you can't, the neurotransmitters that we produce in our gut don't necessarily make it directly into our brain, because we have the blood-brain barrier and those molecules they can't pass over that. But what we can infer is that if you have a healthy microbiome, it helps your body to convert those neurotransmitters more effectively. And then there's also a secondary link between our gut microbiome and inflammation, and how inflammation presents itself in the body and the brain. And we know that can be one of the kind of risk factors for things like depression, for instance. So yeah, there's still a lot that needs to be done, but it is very compelling so far.
Yeah. And I suppose really when you say there's a lot to be done, there's a lot more learning that we can do. And so do you feel that experts like yourself or, the field itself, I don't know, what do you expect to see 10 years from now? Would you expect that you have a much greater understanding in 10 years from now? How long will it take for us to understand the links?
I mean, I wish I could put a time frame on it. I mean, the thing is that the research on the gut microbiome has evolved so rapidly even acutely over the last 10 years, but let's just say in the last 50 years, like we know so much more. So who knows? And it's constantly evolving. I couldn't say it's going to be in X amount of time, but I think that the appetite, excuse the pun, is there for it. And I think, I would expect that we would learn a lot more about how that connection works. I mean, there's some really fascinating pioneers. There's one's a neuroscientist and the other one's a psychiatrist based in Dublin. And their whole thing is around psychobiotics, which is this link between the gut and the brain. And they've done a huge amount of studies themselves, published research papers on it. And they were quite pioneering in this field. I think another also interesting stat, and this is where I just think, is it interesting how nature our bodies like mirror things, is that the gut microbiome is about the same size and weighs about the same as the brain in our head. So there is that, like often it's referred to as the second brain in our gut. Yeah.
And it certainly is a major organ, in that respect. And if it's about the same size and same weight, you would hope that it has as much kind of importance for our general health and functions.
Yeah.
So your two books, you've got Be Good to Your Gut and Happy Gut, Happy Mind. They both provide healthy recipes and tools as well for helping people to break down and balance their meals, and also to develop a happy and diverse gut biome. So for our listeners, what are 3 foods that you cover in your books that are beneficial when it comes to our gut health? You can narrow it down to 3.
I mean, I probably would go more food groups, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I would say So definitely like plant-based foods and as colourful as possible, because the colour really is what kind of gives plants these polyphenol antioxidant benefits. And we know that polyphenols have a really important role in terms of helping to support a thriving, diverse microbiome. And it is a bit cliched, like eat the rainbow, but it gives you a visual representation of having lots of colour in your diet. Antioxidants also have lots of other benefits in terms of like anti-inflammatory benefits and immune system benefits. So I'd say plant foods in as much colour as you can get them. And then fibre-rich foods, because fibre is what feeds our microbes. So if we don't feed them fibre, then they're essentially starved. So fibre you'll find in all plant foods. So that would be whole grains, nuts and seeds, fruit, vegetables. Again, as much variety as you can get in there. Pulses and legumes are also really useful. I'd probably put them as some sort of at the top if I was to pick out a specific food, so like beans, lentils, that sort of thing, because they provide a lot of fibre and also protein, so but a plant-based source. And then the last one, which kind of sort of links to my Polish heritage, my surname's Polish, is fermented foods. So I grew up on sauerkraut, and I actually think, honestly, after all those antibiotics that I had when I was younger, in some way, I'm sure, and I have no scientific evidence for this, but it did help my gut for sure. So I'm a big proponent of fermented foods. So, the lacto ferments are great. So things like kimchi, sauerkraut, you can get them really easily. Although, to be honest, to make sauerkraut is super easy and a lot cheaper than buying it. All you need is cabbage and, bit of salt, and that's it. There's actually a recipe for that, my grandfather's recipe on my website.
I was going to say, you must have a recipe for it. Yeah,
because you're like talking about like £1 for like a cabbage. And it was interesting, I took my dad into one of these like posh health food stores, and his eyes were like out in stalks. He was like, £10 for a jar of sauerkraut. So yeah, I'd say if you can get some ferments in daily, that would be I think is a really easy win. And it doesn't I like the lacto ferments because they also provide fibre as well as the beneficial microbes that you ingest when you eat fermented foods. But, things like natural yogurt, just plain natural Greek yogurt.
That's fermented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just some of that in your day-to-day routine.
Because I was going to ask, in a traditional, say, British diet, what typically is fermented that we should have more of, or do we need to kind of look to other cultures for finding good fermented food?
Yogurt you would, I guess, class. Cheese.
Yes.
Dare I say it?
Cheese is fermented as well, like a good old cheddar is fermented. Yeah,
hard cheeses. I wouldn't use that exclusively relying on cheese to get your like beneficial microbes. But actually it's interesting because I can't remember where I heard this, but it was I think I did a podcast for Food Matters. And anyway, they were talking about actually in a serving of cheese, you actually can find that there's more probiotics than if you were to take a capsule version. And obviously it's in a food-based form. So I wouldn't discount some of those things. We're not great with the ferments. Off the top of my head, there used to be like pickles, but then a lot of people add things like sugar and stuff like that to them. So, but yeah, some good quality cheese.
Yeah. And I suppose the key that you've just shared there is that fermenting food at home is not that hard.
No, absolutely not.
And then just adding a little bit to different dishes.
Right. Yeah, you just want a condiment serving size, because that's another thing. Is like I have experienced that with my clients. It's like, oh, well, I can't tolerate sauerkraut. And then you actually find out they're eating like half a jar, and you like nobody's going to enjoy that. Yeah, you're going to have a bit of a trumpeting circus if you were to do that. So it's more of a condiment serving.
But that's a sign that it's working, yes?
Yes.
And just, I'm interested just on the fermented food. Why is fermented food so good for the gut? What is it that what happens in the gut when you eat fermented food?
Well, again, there's not much science on this because companies are not going to pay big amounts of cash to fund a study on sauerkraut, for instance. But what happens when you ferment foods? Oh, actually, sorry, sourdough is another example. That would be a British one.
Yes.
So when you ferment foods, what happens is the microbes naturally start to break down the food substrate that they're feeding off. So in, for instance, milk, it would be lactase. And then in sourdough, it would be things like the glutens and the proteins in there. So what happens is when they break that down as a side effect, the bacteria multiply. So when you eat that fermented food, you're ingesting the food, but also these microbes that have actually proliferated alongside that. So you're ingesting quote unquote good bacteria.
Yeah, so more fermented food, which, I've started to hear more about it as well. And I've asked myself that question, where are those fermented foods that are easy to eat? So that's really helpful. Now, on the flip side, we have a lot more ultra-processed food. And that's something that, I think we understand more and more that people aren't even aware sometimes that they're eating ultra-processed foods. Can you talk a bit about what they are, ultra-processed foods, what we're concerned about, but importantly, what kind of impact do we know they're having on our gut?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk around ultra processed foods, and some of it can be just quite extreme. I mean, the reality is that in a modern life, we're going to have some ultra processed foods in our diet. It's pretty hard to escape that. And I'm all about balance at the end of the day. So it's not about not having them at all, because that's almost impossible, but just making up a diet that is mostly based on whole foods, ideally with a lot of plants in it. I mean, there is some data out there around ultra processed foods and some of the chemicals in them that might impact on the microbiome, but to be honest, it's not conclusive, so I wouldn't necessarily rely on that. What I would say is that a lot of these ultra processed foods typically tend to be low in fiber, high in sugar, high in salt, which has lots of negative impacts on our health if we're eating a lot of them. And also, as I mentioned before, fiber is what feeds our microbes, so essentially they're not getting anything from it. So if you're eating a lot of them, the chances are you're not feeding all the good bugs in your gut, and then you can get what's called dysbiosis, like an imbalance in the microbiome. Plus, a diet that's high in salt and sugar has massive implications on other things like blood sugar levels and what have you. So
all round, not a great thing. And
not a great thing, but I also wouldn't get obsessed about it, because I think people can get really like, oh, I have to have, everything needs to be, perfect for me to be on a healthy diet. And that's not what we're trying to achieve. Because actually, when you look at a healthy diet, it's about patterns over time, not an isolated food or weekend or whatever, or holiday. It's actually, how are you eating across the span of like a year? And are you having mostly, let's say, 80% whole foods, and I think that's probably a more realistic balance.
And looking at it that way kind of makes more sense and feels more achievable as well, rather than scrutinising every single meal, as you say. So speaking of imbalance in our gut microbiome, research is suggesting that having that imbalance may actually affect our breast cancer risk, which is something obviously that we're very concerned with. And this is because, and you've already mentioned some of these things actually, and this is because, as you mentioned, it can lead to greater inflammation as well as an increase in estrogen production, both of which increase breast cancer risk. But on the other hand, a healthy biome may produce cancer protective microbes. Again, you've started to talk about some of that. So in simple terms, if we can describe it that way, and I think you've touched on it a bit, what for our listeners does a kind of a balanced gut look like? What should a balanced microbiome look like?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because it's like people like, do I even know if my gut is healthy? I mean, objectively, you want a gut microbiome that's diverse with species, because we know there's actually been massive cohort studies on this, like the American Gut Project, where they looked at thousands of people, and the findings were basically that people who ate 30 or more plants per week had a more diverse, ergo healthier gut microbiome, which sounds like a lot, but actually if you drill it down, it's actually not. And I can give some hacks on how to do that as well, if it's useful. So diversity in the microbiome is what we're kind of aiming for as a general rule. But then I always think that your daily motions are a good way of knowing whether or not you have a healthy gut. You have a daily reading there. You don't need an app for that. You can just literally just take a glance below, you know, and you want to have like a healthy, regular stool. And what does that mean? Because again, that can be quite, you know, what's healthy for one person. Well, that's how I've been my whole life. But essentially you want, you know, a daily bowel movement 1 to 2 times per day. It wants to, you know, it needs to be easy to pass, kind of sort of a sausage shape, ideally without any lumps and cracks and not too mushy. And you want to kind of achieve that evacuation euphoria. I mean, that's what I put in.
I love that.
Be good. So you want to feel like you've fully emptied and you're not feeling like you need to go back there and things like that. So in Be Good to Your Gut, I do actually go through like the perfect poo and like what that should feel and look like. And there are some really good reference tools for this, like the Bristol stool chart is really good if you're kind of a bit like, how does my poo stack up against what is a healthy poo? That's quite a good thing to look at. But I do encourage my clients to just keep an eye on that. Yes. And also you can identify other things quicker through that. So it's a really important daily monitoring.
Always look behind you.
Yeah. I mean, not obsessively checking number twos, but, you know, a little glance down, I think, is always a good thing.
Yeah. No, it's not the first time I've heard someone talk about poo on this podcast. So it's becoming a kind of a common topic. But great advice. Now, so given that our gut is, as you say, it's almost like a second brain. It's a very large, important immune organ. So how else is this microbiome? How else can it help protect us from illness?
I mean, yeah. So the immune system link is a really, really like fascinating one, and one that I don't think a lot of people realise. So in my practice, people are like, what can I do to like help my immune system? You know, should I take vitamin C or zinc or whatever? And I'm like, actually, you need to look at your gut, because 70 to 80% of your immune system is located and managed in your gut. And it fundamentally relies in part on the health of the microbiome. So the microbiome has a sort of signalling role with the immune system. So they work together. So if your gut is not healthy, then that can impact on how your immune system's functioning and can also skew responses. So the immune system can have hyper reactions, and that's what kind of links to things like autoimmune conditions and gut health as well. So yeah, it's a really important part of supporting your immune system.
Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of autoimmune conditions that have a gut relationship as well, aren't there? So things like Crohn's disease and so there seems to be a relationship there, very strong indicators. Now, something that a lot of us enjoy is alcohol. But unfortunately, it is a risk factor for breast cancer. And so at Breast Cancer UK, our general advice is for people to think about keeping their consumption down, so sticking to the alcohol guidelines or actually stopping altogether, given that for women, there isn't really a safe level of alcohol when it comes to breast cancer risk. But there's other benefits to cutting down, aren't they? Can you tell us a bit about how alcohol specifically affects our gut function?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think in my decades as a therapist, I think one of the two most common questions are, what's the best alcohol to drink and what's the best sugar? And I'd say probably none for both. And it's actually more of a rarity in the diet if we're going to decide that we're going to consume either of them. But alcohol with the gut has almost no benefits to it. I mean, I know some people kind of throw out, red wine has polyphenols. You get a lot more polyphenols in like blueberries. So I don't think we can genuinely use that as a kind of a reasoning for it, because it creates inflammation in the gut, irritation. I mean, I think probably lots of people have experienced DADS, which is day after drinking stools, which are kind of looser and not particularly pleasant.
Never heard it put that way.
DADS. Oh yeah. It creates irritation in the gut, but more specifically, it can impact on the composition of the microbes. So and that leads to an imbalance in the microbiome, and things like even affecting the gut barrier functioning. So it's not a good idea. But I'm also a realist, and I also, like pre-coming on to recording, we were talking about our favourite, like when we do have a tipple. So I get that that's part of also thinking about mental health and and sometimes, obviously not using alcohol to like make yourself feel better, but in a collective sort of dinner out with family and friends, and you want to have a nice glass of something, that's part of life and enjoyment of life and food. So if you are going to drink, just make sure you do it on a full, not empty stomach, basically, and stick to like one glass.
Now that's interesting, because alcohol is often associated with kind of drinking on an empty stomach, the kind of so-called liquid lunch, or the celebration part of it is empty. So that's really interesting advice to drink with food if you are going to have a glass of wine. Yeah. And that helps reduce the imbalance that it can cause to...
Well, it just buffers more of the irritation, really, because it's like putting gas on a fire if you're just putting alcohol into an empty gut, really.
Makes sense. Makes absolute sense. Now, another interesting bit of research is showing that the microbiome can also affect our weight. And this is particularly pertinent for us because maintaining a healthy weight is advice that we provide in order to support people to reduce their risk. And it's especially important for women after the menopause. So can you explain how our microbiome can impact our appetite as well as our metabolism?
Yeah, so it's interesting with a lot of the kind of the drugs out there that are getting a lot of press, things that like Ozempic and what have you, that target these particular receptor sites in the gut, like the GLP-1 receptor sites. But actually our microbes also impact on such receptor sites. And also things like our appetite hormones. So there's a regulatory effect in terms of like how the microbiome interacts with all of these hormones in our gut that then impacts on our satiety levels, which then has a knock-on effect to our weight. But even, there's not huge amounts out there, but how our microbiome differs in terms of how many calories are extracted from foods as well. So yeah, having a healthy gut is definitely a part of a healthy, sustainable weight management, weight loss program.
Right. So, and adversely, having an imbalanced gut microbiome can lead to weight gain or making it difficult to manage weight?
It may skew those appetite responses,
Yeah.
And also if the microbiome is imbalanced, it can create heightened inflammation, and actually things like obesity have been sort of deemed as more of like diseases of inflammation.
Yeah, so they're all interlinked, aren't they? We're kind of hearing how just going back to this kind of whole body approach, this holistic approach, nothing can be disassociated, and increasing one risk increases another risk, and they all have that kind of domino effect. And at the heart of it is we're starting to understand our microbiome plays such a key role. Exercise also has an impact on our microbiome. And we know, for example, with breast cancer risk, that if we exercise regularly, moderate to intensive exercise on a weekly basis, it can reduce our breast cancer risk by, around 20%, which is pretty huge. But also some research has shown, for example, and I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this, that athletes tend to have increased gut microbial diversity. So that kind of good, healthy-looking gut biome compared to, say, people who are sedentary. So we think of our gut biome as being linked primarily to our diet, but it sounds as though staying active also has an impact on it and keeping the microbiome healthy. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, there is some data out there to suggest that exercise can have a positive impact on the microbiome, but I'm always careful with stats, because also people that tend to exercise more also tend to make better food choices. So it's trying to extrapolate some of that stuff as well. But taking aside the gut microbiome, and this is where my kind of psychotherapy, mental health comes in, I think exercise is really important for that, actually. Getting outside in particular, seeing daylight, really supports our circadian rhythms, which actually also has a really important impact on our gut microbiome. So it's not even the food you're eating, it's the timing of which you're eating. Are you getting enough sleep and all these sort of things? And exercise really supports all of that and helping to manage stress and things like this. So it's hard to I wouldn't isolate exercise to be the one thing, but how that fits into more of a general lifestyle and how it impacts on those other variables, I do think it's really important. And I also, encourage clients to just not kill themselves in the gym either, because that's another thing. Because when you do that, and I have seen that a lot with my clients who are peri and postmenopause, because there can be weight gain as a side effect, and they go absolutely crazy in the gym doing all these really intense classes, and actually what happened, and under eating to try and lose the weight, and actually what ends up happening is that they end up storing more of that cortisol driven fat around the middle area, because the body's just too stressed.
Right.
So it's not always like do more exercise to try and lose the weight. It's actually just thinking about a moderate approach to it, and thinking about other factors like sleep and stress, and these all interact with that. So yeah,
it's interesting how many times you've mentioned sleep and how important that is. And I think
which is annoying for people in menopause and perimenopause when or people that have children, because I appreciate it's not always that straightforward, but it does have such a big impact. Yeah,
you said to me that often in your work, when you talk to, this was just before we started the recording, when you talk to people about some of the key things that they can put in place, you just go to the basics, and sleep is one of them. And how do they respond to that often?
Well, no, I think it's interesting, because it's like I get clients that come to me and they want the specifics of like which type of zinc chelate should they be taking, or which type of green powder or whatever. But actually I'm like, we're not really sleeping, and actually that we probably need to start when you're maybe drinking a bit too much coffee. So sometimes it's obvious things like people are drinking caffeine too late at night, and like that can impact on their sleep, or they're just on devices. So I'm big, this is a really easy one that's free as well, is don't switch your phone on for the first hour that you get up, and switch your phone off at least an hour, if not 2 hours, before you're intending to go to sleep, because what you're doing is activating a lot of those kind of, the nervous system essentially is being stimulated, and so then you wonder why you're checking Instagram, and or an email or whatever, getting really frustrated or annoyed, switching the phone off and wondering why you can't get to sleep. So and until somebody points that out, it is obvious, but for a lot of people, they're just in their day-to-day routine, they don't necessarily notice
automatic.
it. And those are things you can change, like small children in the middle of the night, and perimenopausal symptoms or menopausal symptoms, obviously we can't, but where we have got control and autonomy and we can make choices around these things, then sleep is a massive thing. I mean, I kind of want to recommend this book, but then I don't, to people that don't sleep. But it's called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and it's a very famous book. But if you read it, it's quite compelling in terms of like, if you don't do anything else, you need to get your sleep sorted.
Okay. And or why wouldn't you recommend it? Because people might get worried?
A little bit, but it's still, I mean, it's definitely very interesting in terms of what he's talking about. Yeah.
I know, it's fine balance, isn't it? Making sure you've got the right information, but then not overly, you don't want to get stressed about your sleep, because that can have a negative impact as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So like Breast Cancer UK, you pride yourself on being science-backed and evidence-based, which is, critically important when we're providing advice to people, isn't it? So we're in an age where lots of information's accessible online. Everyone's a content creator. I mean, literally everyone almost. So how do you cut through all this noise? And why is it so important to be rigorous with the facts?
Misinformation it's out there. You have all these different podcasts that are, or obviously not this one, but more like social media, I think, and TikTok and stuff like that, where people are saying things that are not based on science and evidence. And I think it's just really important as a consumer that you do due diligence to the type of people that you're listening to. And also, I mean, this is something that I can't remember who told me this, but it is really basic. But if it sounds crazy, it probably is. And a lot of this stuff is. And so I just think, if you're listening to a credible expert, you should be able to understand what they're saying as well. Like when somebody's talking a lot of jargon, often that's kind of like covering up things that actually are slightly misleading. So it is really tricky. But then obviously on the flip side, podcasts like this and some of the social media, people on social media are providing some really credible content, but it is hard to cut through the noise. But I just say, check the person's credentials, actually just be like, employ some critical thinking, like does this sound a bit mad? Is this a bit like it's convoluted? And I think you can probably work out a lot from there and basically discard a lot after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like this idea of a magic bullet. Sometimes things are presented as, this is the simple answer to all your problems. And I think that's where a little bit of critical thinking needs to happen. But speaking of which, you have your own podcast, The Wellness Breakdown. And it really helps make the science more digestible. Just what you said, it's about communicating a fairly simple message and not too convoluted. Can you tell us a bit about what you aim to do on your podcast? It's quite interesting, and why you think it's important that you have the conversations that you do have on your podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I will, but I would say that we're probably not going to continue with the podcast, but we do have like episodes there. I mean, Rose and I did it for like 5 years, and it was really great. Actually, we got to cover some subjects that we really wanted to. So things like fertility, perimenopause, some like sort of supplements, things like vitamin D. So yeah, it was a really, lovely sort of time. And there's some great episodes there that people can go and listen back to. But yeah, essentially we just wanted to cut through some of the BS and actually come at it using some of our own clinical experience, personal experience, challenge some of the kind of more bonkers ideas out there. So yeah, there was definitely a learning curve for both of us as well, actually. But I think what we realised actually that there is a lot of these faddy things out there, and I'm always the one. I mean, I definitely eye roll quite a lot with a lot of it. But again, if something's promising you something as a quick fix solution, 9 times out of 10 it's probably not going to be the one that's actually going to give you the benefits long term. And I guess that was the ethos of the program, was to kind of just highlight some of those things that were very zeitgeisty.
And what are some, can you name a couple, I suppose, that you highlighted, say, particular health trends that might be quite popular, that you felt needed challenging?
I don't know, because when we first started it, Rose and I would challenge each other, and she challenged me typically with things that I don't really like or I don't really endorse. I mean, I did a juice fast, and I think that was ridiculous, actually. So yeah, I'm not a fan of those. What else did I do? I did the keto diet, which was obviously that had a lot. I think it's probably less popular now, but at the time it really was. And I get why people might use it for clinical reasons. Like, I know there's been some good research around epilepsy, for instance, but I don't understand why other people just generically are going on these keto diets and cutting out carbs, because to come back to the gut piece, fiber is in carbohydrates. So if you're going too low carb, you're basically starving off your microbiome. And so I didn't really enjoy that one. I mean, it's interesting because some of them are, not necessarily, now there's a lot more research around the kind of cold plunges and that sort of thing, which is actually really interesting.
That is interesting.
And I do think there's probably something in that, but I'm a bit of a lizard, so I don't like cold things. And so doing cold showers was personally felt horrific. So yeah, there was a few there. What Rose did the carnivore diet, I remember that one as well.
Right, so just meat.
Yeah, and that was because she actually is, her household is, I think she's the only omnivore there. I think her husband is vegan, I know that, and I think 2 of the kids are vegetarian. So yeah, that was really challenging for her. Yeah,
right.
And she didn't feel great on that one. No.
So yes, using yourself slightly as human guinea pigs.
Oh yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose if you have that lived experience, you're in a better position to kind of have an opinion on something, if there's not much science out there. So we at Breast Cancer UK, we have our prevention quiz, and it's something we spend a lot of time promoting because we want to encourage everyone to be able to find easy steps really to make positive changes to their habits. And so the idea behind our quiz really is it helps individuals to identify those risk factors that they can have some control over. And it also means that they can come up with their own prevention plan, something we're really passionate about. So given that every gut microbiome is different, what are some of the things that we can learn on an individual level about our bodies that helps us to make the right changes for our health? So how can we understand our own individual bodies in order to make the right changes for our own health? I suppose it's not a one-size-fits-all.
No, and I think something that we were talking about before we started recording is that I think there's this tendency to sort of outsource things or look at what other people are doing or check measurement tools, whether it's phones or watches or whatever, to give us data on ourselves. But I think honestly, I think there's a lot we can do subjectively as well, like just asking yourself, like, or looking at your own body in a way that, like, checking your poos in the morning and think it's after each meal, being like, oh, how did I feel after that? And getting up in the morning and rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how energized do I feel? So I think there's a lot of, like, just trying to connect with your body really, and listen to it more rather than trying to find the answers on, you know, from other experts. Or, I mean, not that it's not good to listen to experts, but I think you are your own best expert in a way as well. And it's trusting that, and what feels good for you. And so I think looking at, like, patterns of how your body responds to things can be really useful. I mean, just from a nutrition perspective, I think what can be really empowering, and again, like, something simple that you can do is just do a food diary for like a week, and also include in that your stress levels, your sleep, what your bowel movements are doing, and just give yourself like a really objective view about what's going on. Can be really useful.
Yeah. And I think often actually people, I think we've touched on it a little bit, they set their sights a bit too high when they want to achieve change. So you mentioned, perimenopausal women, postmenopausal women really pushing themselves too hard, and consequently, failing on achieving, I suppose, what they set out to do. And things like New Year's resolutions, often they're just unrealistic. What are some goals that people can set? What are some tips, I suppose, that you can share to make it easy for people to start those sustainable changes? Because, I think there's something very symbolic about a New Year's resolution, and it's, it kind of energizes you, motivates you, but equally, most people tend to not succeed in their New Year's resolution. So what's a way to start to make changes?
So firstly, I would say don't restrict, because again, thinking about, especially with the gut, it's like, actually, how many plants can I introduce into my diet rather than restriction? Because restriction, actually, I mean, there's a lot that we could talk about there, and just that's probably a whole podcast around the negative relationship that breeds with your body and your food and things like that. So I would say don't restrict, aim for variety. So again, thinking about how can I get more variety in my diet, because most of us actually tend to rotate around the same things. So just trying to do that. I mean, there are a lot of free recipes on my website that people can go to, actually, that can give them some nice, easy idea. I'm not a trained chef, I'm a cook, but I get a lot of positive feedback on that, and so that can give you some nice ideas. And then I would just say, again, to your point about making small but realistic changes, because those are the ones that stick, because actually consistency always wins over perfection, and habits build or will breed into long-term behavioural changes, whereas perfection is rarely, if ever, sustainable, and actually can make you feel worse after it. So when you don't achieve that high bar that you're setting for yourself. So building those small changes in, like I said, cumulatively are going to have so much more of a bigger impact.
Yeah. And that's how we try to frame it as well when we help people with their prevention plan. And that's to come up with something that you can live with, that's realistic, and that you can be consistent with. And it might seem like, oh, well, that's hardly anything. But actually, those small changes really make a difference. And maybe that's the perception thing, isn't it? That people don't appreciate that those small changes can have that lasting impact. Something else that you've been quoted as saying that's interesting is that we are only as healthy as our soil. What do you mean by that?
So I think it was an article I wrote for a brand called Ion. where the founder's very much about kind of soil health, and basically it's the whole concept is that we are just one big ecosystem really, and the link between the microbes in our soil and the microbiome in and on us, and how like depletion of our soil, which is real, has impacted on the quality and the nutrient density of our foods really, and that's what feeds our microbes. So that was kind of the analogy there. But you know, it is important to think about where our food comes from, and I appreciate that it's obviously more expensive to eat organically and things like that, but obviously there's more of an attention to like how the food is grown in that way. But there are, you know, I think there's hacks around that as well. Like if you are somebody that goes to like farmers markets or buys fruit and veg locally, the farmers are more transparent about what chemicals and pesticides they're using, things like that. So you don't necessarily always have to have the organic stamp. Like you can buy,
because that can be just so much more expensive for people. Yeah.
But then you can, I mean, it also depends, like, again, it just takes a bit of time, but I think it's worth the investment of, like, sometimes you're talking about a penny or two difference between certain fruit and veg that is organic or non-organic. But I'm a big fan of things like freezing, fermenting, preserving, canned food, like dried pulses and legumes, then they're not going off, because actually we waste a lot of food as well. So you can actually buy those you know, more kind of foods with a longer shelf life and actually buy organically there, so you can save money that way as well. And batch cooking and things like that.
Food wastage is a whole other topic of discussion. But those are great hacks, and I suppose the other element that we also touch on at Breast Cancer UK, because of the environmental links with breast cancer, are things like some pesticides which are known to have EDCs, endocrine disrupting properties. So that's another reason why we talk about organic food, but we also understand how complicated it is for people to buy organic food. And so you talked about sharing a whole bunch of hacks. Can we finish off the interview with just, you know, your top hacks for a lot of the stuff we talked about today? So getting, say, for example, if we can't afford organic food, what are some hacks around making sure we get the best quality food, and then also, you know, having that regular intake of the right food? So you talked about how do we get those 30 different plant-based foods in our diet.
Yeah, so they're all interlinked actually, in the sense that, like, you know, buying organic, you know, you can buying the organic like frozen fruits and veg or dried pulses and legumes and things like that also helps you to achieve diversity, because those are the foods that are not going off. So because what happens is when people are trying to get like 30 or more plants in a week, they're like, well, I'm going to have all these, if I'm having to buy all these different fresh fruits and veg, I'm never going to eat all of that. So that's where the frozen and kind of like
makes sense.
Both can sort of solve the same problem, as it were. But yeah, things like you know, in terms of diversity, like soups are great because you can blend up a few there, or smoothies if that's, you know, your jam. Frozen fruits and veg, and mixing. So buying things like mixed berries, so you're getting more than one type of berry in there. I'm also a fan of a nut and seed mix, because you can put like 5 or 6 different types in there, and you just roast them on a baking tray and pop them in a jar. I mean, I always stick things like fennel seeds in there or something like that, and some dried herbs as well. So you can just like play around with it a little bit. Yeah. And then you can just pop that on things like soups, salads, cooked veg and things like that. And then you're already getting like in that 1 tablespoon, there's like maybe like 5 different types of fibre.
Amazing.
So yeah, those would be some of my top hacks to get diversity.
Brilliant. So that brings us to the end of our questions, but I have got a question for you that I ask all of our guests. Given that, you know, we've talked about really exemplary health advice, do you have any guilty pleasures?
Oh, gosh. In terms of food?
Or anything, really.
It probably is food, but then I don't know. I don't really have. There's no guilt with this, but I don't think I can be like a really fresh sourdough toast with lots of butter on it.
Oh yes.
And there's no guilt in that at all.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I no margarine, butter, and I like it when I can really taste the flavour of the butter.
Yeah.
And a little bit of butter can't hurt, can it?
No, not at all.
So also, a thing that we like to share with our listeners is any kind of podcasts or films or books that you would recommend.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Apart from your own podcast, of course.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so I kind of like, all of those I like where sort of science meets humanity basically is an overarching thing. But recently, I love Lost Connections by Johann Hari, which is basically sort of looking at mental health in a broader context. So looking at like connection, purpose, environment, which kind of mirrors what we've been talking about in my ethos around like a holistic viewpoint. But I like that book. It's really good. I really like the documentary on Netflix called, now I'm going to get this wrong, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat.
Okay.
Sami Nosrat is the chef sort of, or the author of the book, and then the Netflix documentary is taking each of those components and going to different places in the world, and they show how it's cooked, because I mean I love food, so that's more the foodie aspect of me. And then I read the book first, which is How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan? Yeah, How to Change Your Mind. And then that was also made into a documentary on Netflix, which is really interesting, and it's all around kind of psychedelics and mindset things, which is really interesting.
That one. That was very interesting.
So there's a couple there.
Wonderful. Yeah, that gives us a bit of insight into your interests, and really interesting. Okay, so what are your plans now? What are you up to now?
Well, I'm in the last part of a master's in psychotherapy with the idea to complete the 4 years training and then integrate that more into my existing nutritional practice. But I would have a focus when I do start opening my clinic for psychotherapy next year for helping people with chronic disease, because that's something that I've been doing from a nutritional perspective. And certainly I think for people that are going through cancer, have been through cancer, it's really important to like also address the emotional challenges that come with that and after it. So that's going to be the longer business plan in terms of the clinic. And then I'm working on some really exciting projects. I'm really excited about a luxury health place that I'm working with on their menus. So I'm devising their menus, which is really, really, I love menu development. That's, being in the kitchen and getting my hands in the food is great. And then personally, I keep saying this, but I do definitely want to go to Japan either next year or the year after, depending on the masters.
Because of the food.
Because of the food, exactly. Because a lot of my food, I use a lot of I borrow some flavours from sort of miso is in quite a bit. I mean, there's another lovely fermented food.
Oh, that's fermented, yes.
Yeah. So I'd love to go and, travel generally, actually, to be honest. I think I need to do a bit more of that, because the last couple of years studying has been quite intense. So I think travel,
Gosh. A lot on, and a lot of great things ahead. Thank you so much for joining us today. Very finally, where can people find out more about you?
So Instagram, my Instagram's handling's at Eve Kalinik, or my website. There's actually some recipes articles on there as well, which is just my name, evekalinik.com. Yes, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely to talk to you, Eve.
You too. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Be Well podcast, brought to you by Breast Cancer UK, a prevention charity supporting people to build healthy, lifelong habits and reduce their risk of developing breast cancer. You can start your personal prevention journey right now by taking our prevention quiz. Just click on the link in the show notes.